Okay, we are recording. So welcome to the professional series. This week's segment, we're gonna have Jill Cadre, attorney at law for New York and New Jersey. We'll be asking her some vital questions, what's going on in the market right now, so we can get a better understanding of what's happening, how you can protect yourself, and so forth. So welcome, Jill, and thank you for your time and being on this Zoom call, which is also going to be recorded and be on a podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Jill Cadre?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited. I don't know, it depends. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for 18 years, and I can't believe actually how time has passed. It's almost 2 decades. I graduated from Cardozo Law School in New York. I'm originally from New York. I am licensed in New York. I did a little bit of litigation in the past at a large New York firm doing insurance defense work. Then I moved to New Jersey and I have a firm for the last 11 years. My firm concentrates on real estate primarily. And now we, in addition to estate planning and bankruptcy and a little bit of everything else. The estate planning aspect of it has been very, very timely, which we'll go into further. But also criminal law, I'm public defender in Englewood Cliffs. What else can I tell you? I speak Spanish fluently. And I'm also a court-appointed guardian in the state of New York, where I've handled a lot of estate work, and I realize the importance of it now, how difficult it is, and why estate planning is really crucial, especially when something like this happens. It's always been crucial, but when unanticipated events happen like this, you want to kick yourself for not having the important documents in
place. Okay. Well, actually, you answered 3 of my questions. Was what's your educational background? You're licensed in New York and New Jersey, is that correct?
I am.
Okay. And you told us a little bit about your expertise. How do you view the current real estate market legally?
It's booming, actually. I'm surprised at how much in motion it really is. The interest rates are low. We're closing rates at about 2.8%, which is unheard of. Even when the interest rates were low, they continue to get lower. So we've been closing a lot of deals in March and April. We've been closing deals, and they're at about 2.8% to 4%. Obviously, it depends on a person's credit and history, et cetera, but I see it moving. I still see little inventory, and I still see bidding wars. So it's been good. The last 2 weeks, I've seen a lot of new stuff come in. I know a lot of agents are out there now. Obviously, there are rules in place to showing properties, no open houses, but you can still visit properties, rentals, etc. So I do see it moving.
Any obstacles right now that you see in the real estate market that investors and homeowners should worry about, and tenants?
There's a lot of laws after COVID. So it really depends on kind of what hat you're wearing. If you're a landlord, you're going to run into issues. If you're a tenant, you're going to run into situations. A business owner, you're going to run into situations. A homeowner, an employer, an employee. COVID has affected absolutely everyone in very many different ways. For example, if you're a tenant and you can't pay your rent, you are permitted not to pay your rent. You're also permitted to use security deposit to pay your rent. You know, as a realtor, that you can never use security deposit to pay rent. That's never been permissible. But in these times, you can use security to pay the rent. You do have to replenish the security deposit at one point when you're financially able to do so. But that's one, excuse me, that's one major change. Homeowner, if you're unable to pay your mortgage, you pretty much are, you can forbear your mortgage for 3 months, and no late fees, no negative adverse reporting to the credit bureaus, but you do have to pay everything on the 4th month. So it's helpful, but yet a little tricky because on the 4th month, you got to pay your mortgage. It's not forgiven, but they are permitting some forbearance at this point.
Okay.
If you're an employer, it varies. Can your employees come into work? When can they come into work? You have kids home being homeschooled. So can anyone go to work while you have kids at home? It's very tricky. A lot of people are using their sick days to stay home with their kids. That's not really fair. Why should you use your sick days in order to stay home? It's very complicated.
Yeah, it does. What's the most important legal steps should people have in place?
So from an estate planning point of view, I think that everyone needs 3 basic documents at a minimum. There's absolutely no excuse why an adult person should not have these 3 basic documents. One of them is a regular power of attorney, where I would give someone I trust to act on my behalf. If I am unable to do so on my own, if I'm incapacitated, if I get sick automatically or disabled, that power of attorney will kick in. That means they can financially make decisions for me, sell a house for me if I need to, obtain an accountant, an attorney, basically act in my position to my best interest. The second document is a living will or a healthcare directive, which we've been doing a ton of because a lot of nurses and doctors are in the front lines right now, exposing themselves. Even agents expose themselves to clients every single day as well, where these healthcare directives permit them, or someone, again, trusted, a spouse, anybody, to make these decisions for them medically. The third is a will, and everyone should have a will as well. Primarily, the main reason for a will, you think that if you are a survivor, let's say you have a surviving spouse, everything automatically goes to your surviving spouse. It's not necessarily the case. Obviously, you want to have these decisions. You want to make your own decisions as to where your assets are going to. If you don't have a will, you're gonna have your spouse or your partner, your family, your children go through hell, pretty much. They're gonna have to go to probate court. They're gonna have to spend hours and hours, months, trying to figure out what your assets are, trying to obtain those assets for themselves, spend a ton of money on legal fees. I mean, it's a loss in itself when you're dealing with a death, to then deal with trying to settle somebody's estate. It's a nightmare. It's a complete nightmare. I know it from personal experience, and I know it from experience as an administrator for a few estates, for people that I don't even know, and it's a nightmare. Absolutely every single person should have a will, whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you have a common law relationship with someone, because there's no common law recognized in the state of New Jersey, so that's extremely important. Whether you have children from, let's say, a first marriage, it's tricky. You are leaving your assets to somebody else to decide. And that surviving person, whether it be a spouse or a partner, or even children, minor children at that, they're going to be dealing with a myriad of issues. And it's not easy, and it's expensive. So for a very small fee, you can really avoid all these issues and really help out. And not only that, but direct where your assets are going to go to. People assume that it's going to be left to your surviving spouse. That's not necessarily the case.
Well, the good thing is on this call, we have the privilege to have a CPA, an attorney, and a financial advisor. Andy, you're the CPA. I know you're in California now, but you did practices in New York and New Jersey. If you don't have a will, I know there's a tier of the taxes, more or less, give or take a percentage. Someone doesn't have a will, how much they're getting taxed on?
Right. Well, I think in New Jersey, it's more based on who the beneficiaries are. So they have different tiers of beneficiaries. They have the A class, which is like a direct lineage, like a child, a parent, kind of like on a straight line. And generally, not all the time, but generally in those cases, the tax is basically minimal. And from a real estate standpoint, what's nice, and the three of us have actually talked about this before, but a will is very important for real estate assets, for real property, because when a person passes away, when a decedent passes away, the basis, the amount that they originally paid for the property is actually increased to the fair market value of the property. So whenever you sell a property in New Jersey, really in almost any state in the United States, you take whatever the selling price is and you subtract out that basis number. So with all else being equal, if you wanted to sell a property, your taxable gain could potentially be the sale price minus that basis. Well, when there's an inherited property to one of those A lines, there's a will that says, hey, my daughter, my son is going to inherit this property, whether it be a rental property, primary residence. With all else being equal, that basis, the amount you subtract from the sales price, would be increased to the fair market value on the date of death. And so we personally experienced this not too long ago. And so from a tax standpoint, that's very important. Now, as far as a rate is concerned, it's all over the place, but the B class, and I'm making up these letters, but I call it B class. That would be like a brother, a sister, you know, a son-in-law, a daughter-in-law, et cetera. Usually those assets could be taxed at about 10%. And that's an inheritance tax that's imposed by the state of New Jersey. That's not even a federal, you know, estate tax or an income tax. And so that would generally be about 10%, plus there's some additional money. And then anyone else, I believe, is taxed between 11 and 15%. That would be like the C class. That would be someone outside of the family, something to that effect. So the will is very important because it does specify, hey, this is my daughter, this is my father, if I survive my parents. I feel that it's, you know, it's crucial, as Jill said.
Thank you for that input, Andy, from the accountant, the CPA over here. Now, with that, as we can see, it's very important monetarily, but also to protect your family. What's the most important, well, actually, what's the mistakes that people should avoid when implementing an estate plan, Jill?
The biggest mistake is not having these documents in place. I mean, I can't stress them enough. I mean, I honestly, and I'm guilty of it, I don't have a will, and I definitely need to do one. There's absolutely no excuse. And so me giving this speech is somewhat hypocritical because I need to do my own will, but it's extremely important. That's really the biggest mistake that you can do. I know what a lot of people too are trying to do these days, as well as transferring the properties and doing quitclaim deeds to, for example, and Andy could speak about this as well, is that if you have an elderly parent, let's say, and you want to, and they have property and you want to transfer it out of their name, either into a children or into a trust, you know, that has tax implications in itself. And you also have the Medicaid, possible Medicaid lien on that property. So it may or may not be worth it. That asset is for that parent to live off of. You really, if you can try, avoid Medicaid coming into your life. They will put a lien on that property. I had a situation where I was representing an estate. Mr. Flynn from New York passed away, and he left a disabled son who actually lived in California. Medicaid was coming after him, you know, with their clause. He was in a nursing home. He owed a large amount of money to that nursing home, and he had a very profitable property in Queens that they were going to go after. I was fortunate enough to do a special needs trust for this disabled son who obviously he was completely disabled. Unfortunately, he was not able to make decisions for himself. He didn't even know his father passed away, which was extremely sad, or could understand that his father passed away. So we set up a trust so that all the money went, well, we negotiated with Medicaid. Medicaid did get a portion of it, but they got just a slight portion versus what they would have gotten had no trust been put into place. So you really have to speak to an accountant and an attorney before making these moves. We put, like I said, most of the money into the trust. It now goes directly to take care of the son in California. And I'm most proud of that case because, you know, here you are really advocating for somebody that has absolutely no voice, doesn't even know their father passed away, doesn't even understand that. And, you know, I was able to really save the estate as much as possible for the son and, you know, work it out with Medicaid. Obviously they were owed money, but nothing what it would have been. So, you know, think about these things. A lot of people are superstitious. They don't want to have a will in place. They think if they have a will in place, they're going to die the next day. No, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're doing your family a disservice by not having these documents in place. If you have minor children, again, you should have a trust in place for them. You would want to have a guardian in place. You know, who's going to take care of those kids? Who's the successor guardian? If that first choice is not available, who's your second choice? You know, these are all just really important decisions. You do need to think about them and really get the proper legal advice and the proper tax advice also, because it may not be worth it at the end of the day. Who knows? Depending on what assets you have, it really depends. It's very, very case specific.
You know, with this whole COVID, obviously we never had one of these in 100 years. I believe it was 100 and something during the Spanish flu. What should people do during these times besides having a will, which I know you've been talking that? What else? I mean, there's nowhere to prepare, but what should people be doing, or what should they be thinking about?
Aside from washing the hands and being careful and standing 6 feet away from people, just being cautious. I mean, these are unanticipated times. I would say start saving money, start putting things into place. You know, we're fortunate enough to continue working, but there are people who don't have any assets, who don't have work, who can't pay their rent. So how are you going to kind of build your not worth, but how are you going to live? Basically, you're going to have reserves in place, or 6 months of reserves even enough now? Probably not. We didn't know the state was going to be shut down for 2-3 months and when it's going to open. So where are you going to get money from? And I think that's the most important, and maybe having different streams of income, different assets. It's hard to say. It's very difficult. No one anticipated this, but where are you going to get money from next time something like this happens? Where are you going to get reserves? Do you have savings? Where can you invest money? Just really protect yourself and start thinking outside the box and coming up with creative solutions as to what happens. Instead of buying toilet paper for the next 18 months, like, where are you going to get money to support yourself and live and pay the rent, etc. So.
Okay. Top 3 things to implement right now if you haven't done so already.
Other than what I said.
So back to the thing.
Back to
living will, a will, and power of attorney.
Power of attorney, living will for healthcare directives, and a will. The power of attorney and the healthcare directive, no excuse. Everyone should have that. God forbid you pass away immediately, you have a car accident, you just never know what could happen. You can have a heart attack. You need these things in place.
Okay. You're a commercial tenant. You're a landlord. You're going through this crisis. You're not able to pay. Can your landlord evict you because it's commercial, not residential, because it's commercial?
So the quick answer to that currently in this situation is no. Okay. There is an executive order in place in the state of New Jersey that Governor Murphy has, basically stating that there is no debt collection for the time being. Now, basically it's 90 days. Initially they were talking about extending it to 120 days. That was just last week. I don't know if that's passed, but basically you cannot collect debt from somebody. That could be rent, that could be a medical bill, any bill, basically. Okay. As an attorney, if someone owes me money for my fees, I cannot right now collect on that while this executive order is in place. And 90 days after that executive order is in place, I cannot go after that person. So if a landlord is owed rent, they cannot send a letter, they cannot communicate with that tenant, they cannot harass a tenant, start a lawsuit, nothing for 90 days after this executive order is lifted. So it's helpful to those that are affected by it, absolutely. But it's going to take some time for everyone to recoup.
Okay. So I'm pretty much done with all my questions. So I'm going to open it up to everyone. Everybody's unmuted, just in case anybody had a specific question that they wanted to ask you.
I have a quick question. As far as the mortgage forbearance, the mortgage deferrals, you said that it has to be paid in the 4th month. By default, are they just requiring whatever amounts you've missed to make a lump sum payment? Or are they basically adding it to the back end, or do you have to request special permission?
Yes, so very good question. It's very case specific and every bank is different and they are treating it differently. So they are requiring payment on the 4th month in a lump sum, or you do have to request specific permission in order to apply that to the end of the loan, to the back of the loan. Gotcha. Yeah, but there's no late fees and they're not reporting it, as you know, but it's you do have to request it. I think if you cannot make the 4th month payment, The good news is too, they can't really start foreclosure. That's considered debt collection also. So foreclosures are right now in forbearance as well until the executive order is lifted. That's going to take some time. I probably imagine a lot of short sales happening. Excuse me, short sales happening after this. Foreclosures increasing, bankruptcies increasing. It's a difficult time, but it's nothing like 2008 either, where the economy just completely shut down. Things are still moving. It's somewhat economically, it's somewhat positive. So I believe once this happens and comes back to normal, pretty much start, as if nothing happened.
Yes.
Great question, Andy. Anyone else? Any questions? Vanessa, Maria?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Everybody's being shy. Okay.
Vanessa doesn't have any questions, which I'm surprised by.
She's not even saying a word. All right. Well, Jill, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate all the advice. So now we know the top 3 things, and pretty much the whole subject was make sure you have power of attorney, a living will, and a will in place. And this should help you in the future. And then, God forbid, we still have another pandemic. We are all prepared and we're all protected legally. So this is being recorded. This will be reposted again, just in case anybody wants to take some notes and share with anybody else. So thank you very much for your time. We try to always keep this under 45 minutes. And thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.